Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Startup Secrets for Entrepreneurs, and I'm your host, Shelby Oleschlager. Our mission here is to help entrepreneurs make a difference and navigate the messy world of startup or relaunch. Join me today where we dig deep with our guests to give you the best concepts and strategies to fast track your business. Today, our special guest is Mark Herschberg. You might have to correct me if I'm wrong, but Mark is here with us today. And Mark, I just want to give you a welcome. Thank you so much for joining. To get started, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks for having me on today. I have a very interesting dual career. I came out of MIT back in the 1990s and started off as a software developer. This was during the dot-com era. I quickly realized I wanted to become a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. To get that job, I realized it wasn't just about being the best engineer. There were all these other skills: leadership, networking, negotiating, team building. No one had ever taught them to me. And we need these skills to be a leader, to be an entrepreneur. Although it turns out we also need them even if we're just an employee. These skills help everyone. So I continued to develop my career and I became a CTO. I build tech startup companies. I've been involved with a whole bunch of them, from cybersecurity to big data to new types of online advertising, bunch of new tools. I've also helped a couple Fortune 500s play startup and launch some innovative new programs within them. But in parallel, I also got involved teaching at MIT because when I realized these skills were so critical, I began to train up my team, and MIT realized the same thing. So they wanted to create a program to upskill our entire community. So I've also been teaching for the past 20 plus years at MIT's Career Success Accelerator. And now, of course, have the book, the speaking, and other things in addition to my main career as a CTO.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool how they work kind of hand in hand. You get the skills in the one field and then you're able to completely translate it over into something different. So you mentioned some of these skills that are really necessary. Can you touch a little bit on them?
Yes, the book has 10 skills, and these are not just ones I dreamt up one night. It comes from research done by corporations and universities. These are the universal skills we see time and again. So they're in 3 sections in the book. The first on careers, how to create and execute a career plan. And by the way, if you're an entrepreneur, you still need one. Your title might not change, but your development certainly does. Second, working effectively. Now, as an employee, it's things like understanding corporate culture and managing your manager. But as a manager, it's things like how do we set corporate culture and how do we help people engage with us? Chapter 3, interviewing. Now, this one's surprising. We all know there's lots of content out there how to interview well, but no one ever teaches us how to be an interviewer, how to actually interview other people, and yet we're all involved in hiring. So I break down how to be intentional with our hiring. The second section, leadership and management, chapter on leadership, one on the people side of management, one on the process side. And these skills matter certainly for those of us in senior positions as entrepreneurs, as founders. But again, even junior people without the title are more effective having them. And the third section covers 4 chapters, 4 skills: communication, networking, negotiation, and ethics.
Wow. Sounds like a jam-packed book. I'm curious, is there one that you find with helping these people, that one that you find is the most important or one that you find is the most lacked within these fields?
No one is most important. They all can be useful in different circumstances. But let me illustrate how to think about how important they are and how impactful they can be. And I use negotiations as an example. We're going to do an example. It may not apply to a lot of the founders here, but you'll certainly be able to follow along. Suppose you're 30 years old and you have a job offer for $60,000. But instead of taking the job, you've learned to negotiate. You read my book, maybe another book. And so instead of saying yes, you negotiate and get $1,000 more, 60 to 61. That's very small. We can all imagine doing that. That's going to take you 5 minutes to negotiate. If you do nothing else in your career, if you sit in that job for the next 30 years until you retire, 5 minutes of negotiating just got you $1,000 more for 30 years. You just earned $30,000 in 5 minutes. Now, of course, you're thinking, wait a second, I'm not staying in that job for 30 years. I have other jobs and raises and promotions. And you're right. and it's going to be for more than $1,000. And of course, we negotiate not just when we get a job, but also with suppliers, with customers. We negotiate with our coworkers all the time. Someone wants more time off and, well, I need you to hit this deadline. We always negotiate. If you get better at negotiating, and we're not talking about being the world's best, but a little bit better, you can add tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars to your lifetime income. Now, here's the big catch. We can do the math with negotiating, but this applies to all of these skills. If you're a little better at leading, at communicating, at networking, it's going to get you more jobs, more customers, more partners, more things that each one, like compound interest, will move you slightly forward, but over time it adds up.
Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense. And I'm just thinking about my own situation. I'm like, yeah, if I could get that negotiation skill, and what do you think builds that negotiation skill actually? Like, is it the confidence, like you're really standing strong with your value and your words? Like, what is it that makes a good negotiator?
What you hit upon, that confidence in your words, that's a certain style of negotiation that we think of as more emotional or almost fronting, where, oh, I'm just going to stand tough and cross my arm.
Yeah, right.
Real expert negotiators know it's not about the tone necessarily. It's about how we create value. And what we talk about when we teach negotiation, it's about expanding the pie for everyone and then trying to grab as big a slice as we can for ourselves. And it's okay if I grab a huge slice of pie and you get a tiny one, because if I made the whole pie bigger, that tiny slice is actually even bigger for you. So it's about value creation and value claiming. And when you get down to negotiating, you understand how you can generate and claim value during those discussions.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, so you have all these skills that you're trying to help people with. Who really is your ideal client that you're targeting these messages for?
Anyone who wants to get better in their career. I want to be a better negotiator or networker or leader, or I want to go further in my career. Maybe it's a title or maybe it's skill development. Mm-hmm. Or we also do a lot of work with executives and HR who say, I want to upskill my entire organization. How do I get these skills into everyone? And now here's a common misconception. People first think, wait, if I teach everyone to be a better negotiator, all of a sudden during those annual reviews, wait, everyone gets $1,000 more. All of a sudden, that's costing me more money. Well, yes, it is. But if everyone on your team was a better negotiator and you did that little bit better with your customers, your partners, your suppliers, when there's internal conflict, they can negotiate better agreements. How much better is your organization? How much bigger is that pie that you will gladly give them those additional pieces, additional $1,000, because everyone benefits?
Yeah. And that just goes back to that whole value idea, where if you're bringing the value, make the pie bigger, everyone's still going to get that slice, but now it's just expanded. So really important, I guess, for like workplace culture. I'm curious with like the brain bump media, how has that really impacted your reach with your messages?
You're referring to the Brain Bump app by Cognosco Media. It's okay. One of the things that happened when I did my book is my neighbor came to me and said, you should build an app. I said, okay, great. What should the app do? I don't know, build an app. Great. But that's all it takes sometimes, is just that little bit of inspiration. So I started to think about, what could an app do? Now, I have background in technology. I'm a CTO. I've worked in media for many years. And of course, I've taught for decades. So I understand education and learning theory. And I just started ruminating in my mind, what can we do? And what I realized is that when we read a book, and this is true for all of us, you read the book, you go, this is great information. You close that last page, and then you forget it all 2 weeks later. Well, that's not useful to the reader because we put all that time trying to learn and we forgot most of it. Some people take notes. I do. Most don't. But even when you do, how often do you go back to it? I said, okay, we want to help the reader. Now, as content creators, people with brands, people who write books, have podcasts, have blogs, we want to be remembered. You're doing this podcast because it's helping a larger business. You're happy to give away for free, but people think of your business and turn to you for advice and consulting. So how can we make that brand stickier? And I thought about how do we create value for both sides? This is actually something I learned from my negotiation training, even though this wasn't a negotiation. It came into product ideation. And what I realized is that we can create a tool allowing for spaced repetition of content. So the tool takes highlights from the media, highlights from my book, things you might literally highlight. It might take highlights from a podcast, those quotes you might put onto social media, the audio clips, the things you want to remember, or from a blog or from a class, puts into the app, and then the app user can download different content sets and get those highlights, get those key takeaways. They can either do it just in time. Oh, I'm walking into a networking event. What were Mark's networking tips? I'm going to pull it out right before I walk in the room.
Right.
Or they set up at time they want a daily reminder. So if they're learning about entrepreneurship from your podcast, each day it surfaces a tip from one of your episodes. They go, oh, right, got to remember that. But by seeing it each day, by taking 2 or 3 seconds a day, you help keep it top of mind. And of course, your brand stays top of mind. Mm-hmm. And so by creating this app, by solving a problem for both sides and creating value on both sides, this is now something I use. My content is there. And it means when people are done with my book, they are more likely to retain the information and the lessons in there to make it more useful. And they're more likely to remember me and recommend the book to other people or to go and look at what else we do.
Yeah, good. It's definitely helpful for your reach. And like you said, just really being a part of their journey while they're going through everything once the book is actually closed. So with the app, is it that it's only your content, or are there other content creators that are integrated in it type thing?
It's for all content creators. So we have different authors, podcasters, bloggers, lecturers, class creators, and they put their content on the server. And then the user comes along and you can, like an app store, you look through what's all the stuff available and you can add what you want. You probably don't want to add all of it, but you might say, I'm reading this book now, or I really like your podcast. I just want to make sure I'm always getting the highlights from it. So the user picks what content they want. And unlike social media, when you think about social media, because we all tweet, we all put things on Instagram. Well, I put the content I choose when I choose to put. I think maybe 3 p.m. Tuesday is the right time to share this. Might be, might not be. But with the app, it's a pull. It's the user says, I want this content at this time. And so it's much more resonant for the user of the app.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Instead of you not being aware of what the content's going to be, like just from scrolling, it's like a mystery every scroll, where in your case, it's kind of like you're specifically picking out the thing that you need at that time. I could see that being very powerful. So how is that? Yeah. How is that process getting, you have the idea and then putting it into play? Because building an app is not an easy feat, and actually getting users and subscribers. So what was that process like for you?
It's certainly not easy. Now, thankfully, I've built a number of tech startups. So I've been down this path before, and it began first with the ideation. And then I have multiple patents. I happen to be experienced in that area. So we filed a patent on the underlying technology. I actually built a prototype version that was just for my book. And there's the Career Toolkit app, which just has content only for my app. And that was a prototype and try it out and see how people use it. Then with the lessons we got from there, I built the general version, Brain Bump, that we're talking about. And so now, of course, there's the challenge. When you look at something like this is what we refer to as a two-sided market. And I've built a number of them. I've built labor markets and data markets and lead markets. If, for example, I had 10,000 users, but only my book, maybe my book and one podcast, they're going to say, yeah, there's not a lot of content here. If I had 10,000 books, but 3 users, say, hey, there's not a lot of people looking at my stuff. So it's a balance, constantly adding more content and more users and trying to keep it in balance. And for now, for example, we're starting with just business content. If you've ever read the book Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, it's a great book on how to break into a marketplace. And he talks about being concentrated and focused in just one area. So while we could support all sorts of content, relationships and spirituality and all sorts of different areas, we're starting just with business, because this way we know the content creators say, I have business content, business broadly, entrepreneurship, careers, marketing. I have business content. The audience is looking for that. And the audience says, If I'm looking for business content, what's going to be on the server? Yep, business content. I'm not accidentally going to stumble into something about how to keep my marriage fresh. I know what I'm looking for. I know I'll find it. But later, following the crossing the chasm model, we'll expand into some of these other categories.
That's awesome. And that kind of brings me to my next question of what your next year looks like, or what some of your goals that you have for the next 12 months are.
For mine, there's a lot going on. Certainly, I'm continuing promoting the book, and I do speaking and workshops in conjunction with that. I have the Brain Bump app, which is building this up and getting both sides, getting more content, getting more users. I'm also launching another startup with a friend of mine. We just received some seed funding for that, and so now we're going down that path. So those things are keeping me all pretty busy.
No kidding. I'm curious to talk a little about podcasting. You said that you go on quite a lot of shows, but you don't really have your own show, even though you are speaking and you're constantly sharing your message. So is there a reason behind that type of strategy?
I've been on over 300 podcasts in the past 18 months. And when you think about podcasting is marketing. As we mentioned, you've got listeners, and the whole idea is you convert them. And let's all be honest about what this is. In my case, I am unique as a author. My book, The Career Toolkit, is about professional development. The work that I do, I am not an executive coach. I'm not here to consult to you with your HR. There's lots of other people for it. When I do consult, I'm a fractional CTO or a fractional CPO, Chief Product Officer. So I do technical consulting, nothing to do with the book. So when I go on a podcast and talk about the book, I'm not trying to sell people and hire me for other things. Now, why this matters is because when we think about having your own show versus another, when I go on different podcasts, I'm saying, hi, you haven't heard of me before. Here's some content that might be useful. And after you hear someone on a podcast, you might say, yeah, that book sounds useful, the Career Toolkit. I want to get better at negotiating or networking. And so you'll buy it because the cost is relatively low for a book. You're not going to hear about someone and say, oh, I'm going to spend $10,000 to hire him as a consultant after one episode. And so when you're selling higher ticket items, that's when you want to have your own podcast so you can build up that brand, build up that trust, say, I've been getting a lot of value and now I have this additional need, but I'm trusting this brand, I'm trusting this organization to deliver that and willing to write the bigger check. But because I have nothing bigger to sell, there's no point going on and trying to really build up that community.
It makes sense. Just even thinking of like the effort involved, it's like minimal effort for a smaller type of product or service that you're selling. For you, it's the book, where if you're going to sell something really high ticket, you are going to invest that extra time to build that trust with these consumers.
If you think, for example, when you go and buy a candy bar, like, oh, okay, it's a Hershey bar. Yeah, I know Hershey. I'll spend that dollar or whatever it costs these days. When you're going to buy a car, you spent a lot more time thinking through it, reading the reviews, taking it for a test drive, because it's a bigger commitment. And so it's more time. So Hershey can just say, hey, go buy my candy bar. But the car companies know it is a bigger process.
Yeah. Even a step further, you can buy a Hershey's bar in 10 different stores and you don't really care because it's the same. Where if you are buying a car, you're going to be like, I need to know the dealership. Even like a step further, it's like, I need to know who I'm buying it from, not necessarily even just the product or the service, like who is actually going to be selling me. And yeah.
Very well said, because you're going to have an ongoing relationship with the dealer, and that has to do with servicing the car and other support you might need. And when you think about consulting services, for example, okay, there's lots of people who claim they're a great accountant, and I'm sure they can all add the numbers correctly. But is this someone I can work well with? Is this someone who's going to mesh with my team? Is this someone I really trust? Will I listen to her advice? And that takes time to build up that level of trust. And that's where you want the repeated contact of, I've been listening to this person for 6 months on her podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's such a cool analogy. And I love how things just are so transferable to like business and real life, how many lessons you can learn with that. This brings me to one of my final questions for you, just to wrap this up. And for people listening, if there's one final bit of advice or tip that you want to leave us all with, what would it be?
I'd say, remember what we talked about with negotiating, how just a small change Getting 1% better at any of these skills can have a massive impact on your long-term success. And this applies to you. This applies to your organization. So invest that little bit of time. In fact, on my website, there is a free download on the resources page. The very first download, the Career Toolkit Development Program, is how you can upskill your organization. I give away completely free. I don't even gate it with an email because I'd rather you have it. I'm not trying to sell you anything, so I don't need your email. But upskilling yourself and your team will have a massive ROI down the road.
Perfect. Yeah. And that actually brings me to my last question is where can people find you?
You can go to my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. There you can see where to buy the book, Amazon, other places. Get in touch with me. Follow me on social media. I put out new content each week under the articles. And then there's the resources page with all those free resources, the one we mentioned, the Career Toolkit Development Program, and a whole bunch of other free resources for you. All of that is at thecareertoolkitbook.com. And then at cognoscomedia.com, COGNOSCO media.com. If you go there, the Brain Bump page will link you to the Android and iPhone stores where you can find the Brain Bump app. You can search for Brain Bump on Android. There's a problem right now on Apple that's not coming up in the search results, but the Brain Bump app, completely free, and we're continuing to add content to it. So each week you'll see more and more content to help you on your development journey. And that's Brain Bump at Cognosco Media.
Perfect. I really like just how authentic you are. I just want to say that, just like, you're like, I'm not trying to sell you on this. I don't need your email. Like, this is for free. You're just delivering the value. And I find that so refreshing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's kind of you to say.
Yeah. And so for the app, I'm curious if anyone is listening, let's say that they are a content creator. Are you taking applicants to build more content right now?
I am. Right now, we're doing invite only, but you can get in touch with me. Or if you go to the Cognosco Media website, COGNOSCO media.com, when you go to Brain Bump at the bottom of the page, there's an apply here for content creators. So tell me a little about yourself. I'm happy to jump on a call and speak with you. And we are looking for more content. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I hope if anyone they fit that description, like they have their business consulting or whatnot, and they want a place to put their content, sounds like a really cool idea. So hopefully people will jump at that. I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation. I definitely took a lot from it, and I'll definitely have to check you out and maybe get that free download.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay.